everyone. Welcome back. My name is Marie Miao. I am a social worker at the Hoag Irvine Cancer Center and also the coordinator for all of our art classes. And I'm so excited to introduce you to brush lettering today with Heidi. And I'm especially excited because she is my friend, but also the first person that taught me calligraphy. So I hope you guys enjoy the class as well. So I will hand it over to Heidi.
Awesome, thank you, Marie. It's so great to be here. Thank you guys for having me and for this opportunity to share my love of calligraphy and hand lettering with everyone. My goal for the class is that anyone can do hand lettering. If that's one thing you take away from today, is that you can do hand lettering and you can do brush lettering. You don't need a lot of special equipment or tools. This is a great little starter kit that I've put together for you, but there's a lot of resources on the internet as well. I was self-taught, and so it just goes to show that, you know, with a little bit of practice, anyone can do it. So let's get started. If everyone has their kits, we'll open it up and I'll kind of go over the materials you guys have in your kit. So the main thing is probably this little booklet packet here. It has like a kit list. Just make sure you guys have everything. We have some paper, some tracing paper, some special pens, but not really that special. There's one brush pen and then just a couple of paint pens. And these you can kind of use any pens you want. They're just like basic paint pens. And then a couple of just like cards, like blank cards that you guys can use. And I thought it would be fun today because of the holiday season. We can make some holiday cards. So these are just two samples I created, pretty simply just with the materials that we have in the kit today. And also some postcards if you guys are interested in sending something, you know, something quick and small, easy, and also a couple of gift tags, as well as ornaments. So there's two different types of ornaments in your kit. One's like a little bit larger, and then one's like a more classic round shape with assorted ribbons for you guys to decorate. And these would make great gifts or mementos. You can hang them up on the wall or on your tree. So the basics with brush lettering, sorry, my mask is falling down. Let's open up our packets, and on the third or fourth page, there should be a brush lettering basics guide. And this is what we're going to start with. And this kind of overviews how to exactly apply the pressure when we're using our brush pens. And so the main difference between our brush pen that we have in our kit, this is the Tombow brush pen, and a regular ballpoint pen, is mainly this tip here that you see. It's really hard to see, but it's a small but kind of flexible tip, and that is the main difference between this and a regular pen, is that this tip is a little bit flexible. So when you press down and apply pressure, it will give a thicker line. So if you guys have some just scrap paper, any scrap paper you don't mind just doodling on, I'm just using some printer paper that we have here. So scrap paper, we can just practice some of the basic strokes. So you want to hold your pen just how you would a normal pencil, a pen, however you hold your writing instruments. We want to keep the tip at about a 45-degree angle. It's not super important that you measure the angles, but basically kind of at a slant. And I just want you guys to practice kind of some downstrokes, just some slanted lines, and just to just so you understand how it feels. So you just draw some lines and apply some heavy pressure. See how that feels, and you should be able to get these like pretty consistent thick lines coming down. My pen is a little dry, but now I want you to practice what it feels like to do a upstroke. So if you apply very light pressure on your paper and just kind of pull your pen up, drag it across, and don't push down very hard, you should see that you are making lighter, thinner lines. So once you are kind of like familiar with how this pen writes these ups and downstroke lines, let's try putting it together so that we can have a thick downstroke followed by a thin upstroke. So just making like a U shape, more or less. So thick downstroke followed by a thin upstroke. Just turn it around so you guys can see. On the downstroke, it's thick, and on the upstroke, you just want to lift up slightly so that the line is a little bit thinner. Next, you want to try to see if you can just connect the U's to kind of be a fluid kind of like squiggle. So thick up, a thick down, sorry, thin up, and then thick down, thin up. And we want to kind of try to do this without lifting our pen up, just so we're practicing the motion and getting your hand used to what it feels like to press down and up and down and up. So once we are comfortable with that, I'll give you guys a couple more minutes to kind of just doodle these thick and thin lines. They don't have to be perfect. You're just getting a feel for how the pen writes. We will try to make some letters and use these techniques to make a letter. So let's try the letter O, for example. So the letter O would be kind of a thin up, a thicker down, and then you're just going to lift up to connect that O. Okay. So you see it's going to be a thick down and then like a thinner up until you connect that O. So most of your letters in the English alphabet you'll be able to make it if you can do an O and some ups and downs. So that is all you really need to know, is these couple of techniques. If you follow along with our worksheet, it kind of details and shows you exactly, you know, where on the A you are making a thicker downstroke, a lighter upstroke here on the lift up, and then as you come back down, it's going to be another thicker stroke, and then light stroke on the lift up. And so using the same fashion, you can kind of write full words using kind of the thick and thin technique. So for example, we can practice making this letter A that's on the paper. So following the guide, we have a thick downstroke followed by a thin upstroke, and then you can lift your pen up if you want, and you can make another thick downstroke. So the great thing about hand lettering and brush lettering is that it doesn't have to be perfect. This is your own handwriting, and using these techniques, you can convert your own writing into what looks like calligraphy using a brush pen. And even if you don't have a brush pen, later I'm going to show you some techniques to kind of get around that and create some faux calligraphy, where you can use any pen, any marker, crayons, colored pencils, and you can create what looks like brush lettering calligraphy. So next in your packets, we have several pages of practice kind of templates. So there is a set for uppercase and then lowercase letters that you can practice along with, and also monoline calligraphy as well as faux calligraphy, which we'll get to in a bit. So let's start with the brush lettering pages here. Everyone should have some tracing paper that's included in the kit. And if you want, you can make some extra copies of this if you have a copier at home, if you want to write directly onto these lines. But if not, tracing paper or sometimes even printer paper you can see through is a great way to kind of practice on top of the templates without actually marking up your templates if you want to reuse them. So if you just put your tracing paper on top of the brush lettering practice sheets, you can follow along and either trace the letters I have written over and over again, or you can just practice right next to it on the line just to practice getting used to writing with the brush pen. So I'm just going to start with a capital A, thin on the upstroke and a thick on the downstroke. gentle lift up. Let's see, I'll try it again. And notice that my letters are kind of on a slant. That's just how I prefer to write, but obviously you are welcome to use your own style and techniques when writing. And so this is just like a guide for you guys to write your letters on these lines. And I find that because this brush pen specifically has a pretty small point, this size of lettering is pretty suitable for this pen, but they sell brush pens that are thicker and thinner and with longer bristles and bigger tips, and those will make bigger letters obviously, but this is a great one to start with. And if you notice, sometimes I go outside of the lines, and that's totally okay. And so notice that sometimes, you know, my letters will dip below or sometimes above. And if you want to create kind of that up and down, like uneven look when writing your letters, it's totally fine to go above and beyond the lines. Whatever your style, just follow your own style. So just give you guys a couple of minutes to kind of practice some of these letters using your thick downstroke and thin upstroke technique. How are we doing, Marie?
I'm doing
Marie's
good.
already an
I'm
expert.
so quiet today because I'm concentrating really hard, and it's so fun. And if you have any questions throughout the class, feel free to type your questions in the chat box so that we can help answer them during our live session.
Awesome. Well, it looks like Marie's off to a great start. Again, you know, this is just one template that I created. This is kind of my style of lettering, and you can find a lot of other different styles on the internet these days. Print out other practice materials if, you know, this is maybe not your cup of tea, this is not how you write. And you can also make your own. You know, you can create your own style guides, create your own letter forms, and that's totally fine, and that's what's great about hand lettering. It's completely up to you and how you want to make it look. I'm going to practice some of the lowercase letters now. Just take my tracing paper. And now let's say you want to put some letters together. You're like, how do we do that? Once you're comfortable with, you know, how the letters are looking in your strokes, it's pretty easy to connect them. You just want to make sure you can connect them after the fact even. So let's say, for example, I wrote a C here, but I want to write cat. And you know, I'm not that comfortable yet, so I'm just going to try to trace this A here. And so I'll trace that A, and you can just go back and just connect your letters if you want even. Let's say there's a T, I just like write that there. So now I've written the word cat. And so let's say I want to write bird, I can trace this B. And if I know that there's an I coming after, I can just extend this little line here a little longer so that it will reach the I. And the same with this line. And then connect the R. And then you can add a D. So now I've written bird. So it's up to you if you want to kind of connect the letters as you go, or you can connect them after the fact. There's no right or wrong way. It's totally up to what you're used to. And as you practice, it will become more familiar to you, how you like to do your letters. The great thing about using these pens is that you can lift up your pen at any time. You're not committed to writing the whole entire word all in one go. You can kind of write one letter at a time. You can go back and fix your letters. You can go back and connect your letters. It's very flexible how you can use these pens. Okay. Let's check in on Marie over here.
I'm having a hard time with cat.
Marie is doing great. You notice on Marie's paper, she is not writing her letters very slanted. She's writing them more straight up, which looks great as well. But she's still utilizing that thicker down and thinner up technique. That's great.
Okay.
Now, let's say, what if you lose this pen and, you don't have it with you, but you want to create some great lettering, some calligraphy. I'm going to skip down here to the monoline worksheets here. And this, you don't really need a special brush pen for. This is just, if you look at it, it's just letters. You can use any pen you want. So let's just take our tracing paper, and I'm still going to use the brush pen because that's what I have in front of me, but let's just say if you don't have a brush pen, you only have a pencil, you have a marker, you have a crayon or whatnot, you can still do monoline calligraphy and then later turn it into faux calligraphy. So I'll show you how to do that, and then you can create lettering and calligraphy using any materials that you have on hand. So for example, this is the same A that we just made, but if you're not using a brush pen, you don't have to worry about the thick ups and the thick downs and the thin ups. You can just use the same pressure throughout. And you don't even have to do it in this style, right? So this is just again, my writing style, and you can just use whatever handwriting is comfortable to you. So this is just basically writing letters, and the difference between this and maybe cursive lettering is that you're going to go a little bit slower, a little more intentional to connect the lines and make each letter form look complete. So for example, on the theme of animals, let's write dog. So I'm going to write a D, a big D, and then I'm going to connect that with, maybe I won't use this paper anymore so you guys can see better. I'm going to do an O, and then I'm going to write a G. So this is pretty basic, just what looks like could be cursive, but notice I took my time. I went really slow so that each letter is very clear. There's some spacing between the letters, because later if I want to add on and turn this into faux calligraphy, we want to have some extra room. So how we're going to do the faux calligraphy is where you would normally have a downstroke, now you are just going to draw in an extra line next to the line you already made. So for D, normally I would push harder on the downstroke here, but since I'm not using a brush pen, I'm just going to draw in an extra line. And now same on the other side, normally I would push down harder here, but instead I'm just going to pretend that I did and draw a line next to it. Same with the O, and you can either do it on the right side or the left side of the letters. It doesn't really matter, it depends on where you have more room. So in this case, I have more room on this side. So I'm just going to fill in some extra lines there. And then on this G, I'm going to go on the inside line and an outside line here. So you can tell that here there's some overlap in the lines here because I went in afterwards, and that's okay. You can leave it like that. Or, you can fill it in and make it look like solid lines. Or you can see here in this Christmas card, I just made stripes to kind of cover up some of these extra lines that I had in the open areas. But if we do end up filling it in, let's just see what that looks like. So I'm just going to color in between the lines that I made. Now you can see this almost looks like what we were practicing earlier with the brush pen, and it just looks like I have a thicker brush pen that I used. So this is a great way to kind of create faux calligraphy if you don't have a specific brush that you're using, or you don't have a brush pen in the color you want. you can use this technique to create what's called faux calligraphy. So here, on the next couple of worksheets, we have some practice templates for where to draw that extra line. So if you're using this template, you will probably write just the letter first, and then the second stroke would be to add in that additional line to give the appearance of a thicker downstroke. So maybe we can take some time to practice faux calligraphy letters. Now notice on my lettering worksheet, I've already gone through and kind of erased some of the overlapping lines, and that's totally optional for you. Obviously, if you're just doing it straight from the paper, you're going to have more overlapping lines than what's on the guide. But let's say you're using a pencil, for example. I love using a pencil to kind of sketch out my letters first. What a pencil allows you to do is you can make modifications. So if I'm using a pencil, for example, I'm writing some letters, and now I want to go back and erase all the lines in between to make it look a little more clean. A pencil is a really great way to do that. You can get rid of some of these extra lines with an eraser, and then take your final pen or whatever you're using to trace over your pencil lines to make it look exactly how you want it. And then you can just go back and erase all those pencil markings after the fact. So that is what I usually recommend for final projects, like if you're doing a card or you're making something where you're going to be gifting it to someone, you want it to look nice. Definitely have a pencil, sketch very lightly. You can lay out where the letters are going to go, make sure your letters are evenly spaced out. You don't run out of room on one side. You can go over it with your brush marker or whatever tool you're using, and then later go back and erase the pencil. What do you think about the faux lettering?
Yeah, I
Marie?
actually like the faux calligraphy. I feel like this was the easiest for me.
Wow, that looks amazing.
That was fun.
Something fun to do once you have mastered your faux calligraphy. You can make letters as big as you want, so you're not limited to the size of the brush tip. With the brush lettering, no matter how hard I push with this brush tip, because the brush pen is only so, the tip is only so small, it's not going to give me that thick of a line. But with the faux calligraphy, let's say I wanted to make a really big, let's just do a B, for example, like a really big B, like I'm making a big sign. Okay. Obviously, if I just use my brush pen, I won't really get very thick lines on here in this scale. But I can always go back and draw them in. So thin upstroke, and then we're going to have a fake thick downstroke. And the same over here. So now you see I've created this really large B. And if I wanted to spend the time to kind of fill it all in, it'll give the appearance of me having used a brush marker or maybe even a paintbrush to create this beautiful calligraphy letter B. So you can go through and fill in, color in where between the lines. So you can use this technique if you're, let's say, painting a sign even. I've seen it done on clothing even, if you're using like special fabric paints and you want to monogram something really large in size. And then you're not limited to what marker you're using. You can do this with Sharpies, you can use this with Crayola markers, any medium basically.
But also, if yours is not looking like Heidi's, just know she's had a lot of practice, and she also has a business that called Hello Posh, where she is doing all of this calligraphy on like wedding invitations, and she has wedding coasters. So
yes, it's funny you bring that up because this started as kind of a way for me to save money when I was sending out my wedding invitations. I wanted to have nice calligraphy on the wedding invitations, but I didn't want to pay for someone to calligraphy the envelopes, and I thought, hey, maybe I can just work on my handwriting and lettering and I can just write them myself. And so I looked up some YouTube videos, looked up some resources online, and just practiced with a pen and found that it was actually not that difficult to do. And granted, it wasn't perfect and it wasn't super nice, and you know, I probably wouldn't charge someone money for me to write it at that time. But years later, now that I have a lot more practice, people do hire me to do wedding calligraphy for them for the special events, to make signs. So it's been really fun to be able to share that that passion with other people. And it all started with something that I enjoyed doing at home, and it was helpful for my own wedding uses, and now I can make cards and gifts for other people using some of these same techniques.
It's like the perfect activity to do during the pandemic too, through the holidays, since it'll look so different this year. Can practice all holiday season.
Yeah, and it's great for things that you might want to just send your friends these days. Now that we can't see them in person, you can send them a nice card that you created yourself, a get well card, a missing you card, thinking of you, hope to see you soon kind of card. If we're past the holiday season, you can make cards all year round now. So now that we've had some practice with our faux calligraphy technique, the last section of this kit, I just made some samples in case you are interested in making holiday cards. This is a great, I guess, illustration of if you leave your letters not filled in, what it might look like, and then if you do fill them in, you can see that it makes a pretty big difference. Something fun that you can do is maybe use two-tone colors. You can do the outline of the colors, letters in one color, and then fill them in with a different color if you wanted some contrast. So this, you can either use your tracing paper and just like trace to practice with, or if whatever you're working with is thin enough, some of these postcards, maybe not, but if you have a paper that is thin enough, you can kind of hold it up to the light and you can kind of trace on top of it, just for practice. So what do you think, Marie? Should we make a card? Or do you want to do the ornaments first?
Well, maybe we can go to the ornaments, since we got a question about the ornaments. On ornaments, are you supposed to peel off the paper? And
that is a great question. Yes. So the paper is here for protection, since these are clear acrylic ornaments. We don't want them scratching in transit. And so you just kind of have to pick off one edge, and then they should just peel back like this. It might take a while to get it started. What I find helps, if you have nails, you can just kind of scratch at one edge until it lifts. So I'm using the circle clear ornament, and what I've seen people do is after they maybe decorate one side, you can paint the other side with a solid color, like acrylic paint, if you want the letters to pop a little more, because right now it's kind of see-through and clear and it might be hard to read. But if you wanted to add like some color to the one side using paint you have at home, or even like washi tape or colored tape, it'll make the letters on the front side pop a lot more. But these are great to use, and I love that they are clear because you can practice your lettering on paper first, and then you can literally just put your ornament down over whatever you have created and trace it on. Obviously for this, we're not going to use our regular brush pen. We have some markers in the kit, So I find that paint markers, either acrylic or oil-based paint markers, work best for this surface, just because it's a very smooth kind of plastic surface. We want the paint pen paint to really grip to it. So I believe all your paint markers should have some plastic wrap, so you just want to open them up, take the top off, and then if it's the first time you're using these markers, notice you want to just give them a good shake. Shake them for at least like 20 seconds or so because they're brand new, and you want to mix up the paint inside.
And you may want to blot it on a piece of paper. So
yes, if you have some scrap paper, or you can even just use these films that you've peeled off, we want to pump and prime the pen. So just give it a few good pumps until you start seeing some ink come to the tip of your marker. And I stress that you should do this on scrap paper, just because sometimes the paint does come out pretty quickly, and you don't want it gushing out over your project by accident. So just give them a couple firm presses, and you can see that my paint's already flowing a little bit. So this is just a silver marker, and this is great because it'll show up on darker surfaces, so such as these craft projects that we have. But let's say, what should we draw for our ornament? So I have created this joy one here as a template. You guys are welcome to use that, but a lot of people like to do family names, maybe something more sentimental. This might be great for gifts, or baby's first Christmas, or new home, or something to you can personalize it and customize it to your year. So let's.
I just saw one where someone did. It was a baby arriving, like, I think sometime next year, and then they had a picture of the sonogram that they drew in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know. I was like, wow, that is very good.
Might not attempt that today. But you guys are welcome to. And then the great thing is, maybe you already have the sonogram photograph. You can just put this right on top, and then you'll have a clear view, and you can just trace it right onto your ornament.
True.
Maybe for our ornament, let me think. I'm gonna write maybe cheers. We'll write cheers on mine. So I'm just gonna take a pencil and just sketch out where my letters are gonna go on my ornament template. But feel free to use like any paper you want. It doesn't have to be these special templates, but I made this just so you can visualize putting your ornament on top. So I'm not using a brush pen, just using a regular pencil for this. You can use a ballpoint pen. I'm just going to kind of sketch out kind of where I think my letters are going to go. So you can see that, I'm kind of like running out of room over here, but that's okay. So I can adjust my letters, and then I can use my faux calligraphy technique to kind of create more thick and thins. Maybe I'll make this S a little smaller. So the great thing about using paper and a pencil is that this is not like final. You can see how messy this is. Obviously this does not look very good right now. But I kind of get an idea of, where I might go. And then I can put my ornament on top. And then I can see these letters. And now I'm realizing that, this template that I have is a little bigger than the round ornament that's in the kit. So just take that into account when you're using these templates, that you might have to make your letters a little smaller to fit into this sized ornament. Marie is writing.
Have you seen those 2020 like quarantine? We survived quarantine ornaments. We survived 2020.
You can get very creative with these. Certainly, I've seen like the toilet paper roll ones. Those are always fun. Or
yeah, have some fun.
all right, so I am priming. I'm going to use this white just because I think it'll show up pretty nicely on with the tree being my background. Let's say if I have like a green background. So I'm just going to prime it on some scrap paper. Make sure I see the white ink flowing out. And then holding the ornament down, I'm just going to lightly kind of trace my lettering onto my ornament. You notice that I'm lifting my pen up and checking my letters as I go, just to make sure that the ink is flowing nicely, and then I can kind of see what I'm doing. And notice, I didn't follow the guide exactly, but more or less I tried. So this is kind of what my cheers looks like right now, and I could leave it like this. I could add maybe like 20/20 onto the bottom of this. But let's say that, maybe I want to create some more thick and thins on mine. I could go back and using my faux calligraphy technique, I'll just fill in some thick lines here. And the great thing about the paint pen is that you can just paint it right on really easily. Okay. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here, kind of creating some drama in my lettering with some thick and thins. Take your time with this. The slower you go, the better your final result will be. And as you go, maybe your pen starts like drying up a little. It might need some extra priming, some shaking. Just do it away from your project and do it on top of some scrap paper. Yeah, if you're going along and you're finding that the ink is kind of leaving some lines because it's drying out, you just want to prime it a couple more times on a scrap paper, and then you should have better flow of the ink. And so you notice that, I didn't get it on my first try. I went back and fixed a lot of things, and I was like, oh, maybe this is not perfect. You can go back and fix and fill in things. So that's a very simple ornament, and obviously you can customize it to whatever wording you want. Take your time finalizing it, sketching it out on the papers. And then all you have to do now is just add some ribbon, and it's ready to hang.
It's the paint isn't filling in. Should I prime it more?
Yeah, if you're finding that the ink's not flowing as well, just give it a couple more primes. Okay. And then the gold might not show up as well. I found that the white probably works the best. But the gold is nice if you want to add some extra sparkle or some embellishments. And for the ornaments, if you just use a very light touch, I think it works a little better, just so it allows the ink to kind of sit on top of the material instead of being pressed in, because there's nowhere for it to be absorbed into. But that is looking really great.
Okay.
If you don't have these paint pens, Sharpie also works really well on this material. Pretty much anything that writes on plastic would work on this material. You just want to give it some time to dry before hanging it up and touching the ink.
Yeah.
I know we are almost out of time.
Yeah.
So just wanted to kind of share these samples with you, and you guys can work on these in your own time at home after you've had some practice and had some time to think about what you want to create or who you want to create these cards for. This one I just did with black and white using the faux calligraphy technique. I just embellished it with the regular black pen. It's very simple and clean. If you want to add some color, this is another sample that I made on the postcard. And it just used some colored markers that my son had lying around, nothing fancy, and just, made a simple holiday card. This one I thought, is very similar to this one, where I used the faux calligraphy technique, but instead of leaving it black and white, I just filled in some embellishments and drew some different foliage things and berries just to add a little bit of color. So don't be afraid to mix in some color. A lot of you guys might have some crayons or colored pencils at home. And lastly, we have these little gift tags, which are fun if you're planning a gift. I think any of the markers will work well on this craft paper. I find that the white really pops really well. So I just made a couple of these like for you little gifts, and on the back you can write who they're for and who it's from.
Okay, and then we have another question that came in. Is there any letter you had trouble with, and how did you overcome it? I had problems with R's.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of letters that I don't prefer writing. I think a lot of times it was just finding a style of writing the letter that was more comfortable for me. For example, I think F. I thought F was really awkward. Like capital F for the longest time. I was like, well, how do I make this basic F like more pretty? How do I make it more like, cursive-y, and there's just not too much you can do with it. And so this is kind of like my compromise. You just have to practice like kind of different ways of writing it until you find a way that's comfortable for you and comes naturally to you. So I looked online at a lot of different fonts about how these letters are written, different ways of writing them. Maybe instead of, G was another one. I know that uppercase G, can look like this. You can write it like this, but I just never found a good way to get it to flow. So I just write my uppercase G's like just like a big lowercase g, but just larger, because I find that this works with my style of writing the best. But some people I see, they like embellish this style of G just as well, and somehow they get it to connect with their letters, and it looks great. I haven't really had, this just doesn't come naturally to me, so I just prefer this style. So I think it's just coming up with your own style and what's comfortable for you. I think Z is another one. Like the cursive Z. I had a hard time like working this into my writing, so a lot of the times when I write uppercase Z, I'll just leave it like this, and I won't connect it with the letters. Mostly this is for like people's last names and stuff, but yeah, it's just practicing and coming up with something that's comfortable for your hand and making it your own.
So it's really coming up with your own typography then.
Yeah, a little bit. And I think the great thing with this is, it's making your own handwriting, kind of elevated it, but it's still your own writing. It's not like you have to copy someone else's font or someone else's handwriting. It's your own writing, and then with these techniques, you can turn it into what looks like calligraphy and brush lettering. Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
No, I think that's it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all had a wonderful time. I hope it was relaxing, and I hope you continue to practice, and hopefully you can get to the cards and tags. We are in December, so we will see you next year. As for me, January will be my last class that you'll see me in, but my colleague will be filling in for me while I'm out on maternity leave. But we have a lot of classes filled for next year already with new activities, new arts and crafts, and some faces will be familiar, but you'll also see new teachers as well. In January, we have acrylic landscape painting coming up. So please watch out for the email blast that will come out. And we will see you next year in 2021.